You're not supposed to keep things, that's what all the grief counselors say, but I could never bring myself to get rid of the last box, Caleb's box. It was tucked away in the attic, under a thick blanket of dust that felt as old as my grief. 3 years. It's been 3 years since the park rangers found him, and the official report called it a hiking accident in Blackwood National Park. And God, it's a terrible thing to admit, even to myself, but when my fingers brushed against the cardboard, the feeling wasn't pure sadness. There was this sharp, shameful pang of relief. Not relief that he was gone, I swear, never that, but relief that the constant, grinding tension had ended. The walking on eggshells, the arguments that started over nothing and ended with slammed doors. That part was over. Inside, nestled between a worn flannel shirt that still faintly smelled of him and a dog-eared paperback, was his old phone, a real brick by today's standards. The police had given it back to me in a plastic evidence bag, and I just shoved it in here without a thought. I don't know what came over me, a sudden, desperate need to see a version of him that wasn't the stranger he'd become in those final months. Downstairs, I managed to find a charger that fit. For an hour, it was just a dead black rectangle on my kitchen counter. Then it buzzed and the screen flickered to life, the lock screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a photo he'd taken from the passenger seat of our car, the old wooden sign for Blackwood National Park, the last trip. The memory hit me so hard it was like a physical blow. I remembered that drive, the suffocating silence in the car. He'd been so on edge, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles were bone white, his eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror. I just assumed it was about us. Another fight brewing, another vacation about to be ruined. I was so wrapped up in my own anger and hurt that I didn't truly see him. I just saw the problem, I had no idea. I spent maybe an hour just scrolling. It was a graveyard of happiness, really, a gallery full of ghosts. There was a blurry video from my 30th birthday, Caleb laughing so hard he was wheezing as I tried to blow out a trick candle. 100 pictures of our old beagle Gus in various states of sleep. A stupid selfie where he'd stuck a daisy behind his ear, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way they did when he was genuinely happy. It hurt. It hurt so much to see that man, the one I had actually married, and not the hollow-eyed stranger he'd been at the end. My thumb was getting sore. I was about to lock it to put the ghost back in the box when I saw the file. It wasn't in the main gallery but in a separate folder labeled personal. The file name was Simple Clinical. Last trip 1M for, my breath hitched. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. I knew I should close it. I knew I should delete it and throw the phone into the nearest river. Nothing good could come from watching it. That trip was the one that broke us. The one he never came back from, but I couldn't stop myself. It was a compulsion, like pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurts. It always does. My thumb hovered over it for a long moment, a lifetime. Then I tapped it. The screen filled with his face, and for a second it felt like he was right there. He was wearing his favorite blue beanie, and the woods behind him were a blur of green and brown. He was smiling, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. A little forced. He cleared his throat. "Hey, Aim," he said, his voice a little shaky, a little too loud. "Day one, we made it. The air up here is something else. Thought I'd just, capture the moment. Maybe we can watch this later when we're not. He trailed off, giving a weak shrug. He was trying. I could see him trying to bridge the chasm that had opened up between us. And all I could feel was a fresh wave of guilt. He kept talking for another 30 seconds or so, just rambling about setting up the tent, about the trail he wanted to hike in the morning. He was trying so hard to sound normal, to paper over the cracks that had become canyons between us. But then it happened. His smile just dissolved. It melted off his face, replaced by a look of utter blank confusion. His eyes, which had been aimed at the camera lens, at me, flicked up, looking past the phone, past where I would have been standing, into the woods behind me. "Oh, for God's sake, Caleb," I muttered to the tiny screen, my old annoyance flaring up like a phantom limb. "What now?" I thought he'd seen a deer, or was about to launch into one of his paranoid ramblings that had become so common. But then his face drained of color. I mean completely. It was like watching a light switch get flipped off, all the life and warmth sucked out of him in a single, silent second. His mouth fell open slightly, his breath catching in a small, sharp gasp that was audible even over the phone's tinny speaker. I instinctively hit pause, my heart doing a frantic drum solo against my ribs. This wasn't annoyance, this was fear. I dragged the progress bar back, my fingers clumsy and slick with a sudden sweat. I squinted at the screen, trying to pierce the pixelated foliage behind his head. At first there was nothing, just trees, deep, dark, ancient-looking pines that seemed to swallow the light. "What did you see?" I whispered, leaning in until the screen burned my eyes. I zoomed in, the image degrading into a meaningless blocky mess. Frustrated, I zoomed back out, replaying those 3 seconds of his face changing over and over. Smile, confusion, terror. Then I saw it, I almost missed it. It was a game of shadows, a trick of the light until it wasn't. Way back, maybe 50 yards, maybe more, half hidden behind the trunk of a massive redwood. It was a shape, a human shape, but fundamentally wrong. It was too tall for one thing, impossibly slender, like a figure stretched on a rack. Its limbs seemed elongated, hanging at its sides at an unnatural length. It was just a silhouette, a smudge of absolute featureless black against the dappled greens and browns of the forest, and the stillness. Oh God, the stillness. It wasn't the stillness of a hunter or a hiker. It was the absolute immobility of a statue, of something that didn't need to breathe. It was just standing there, watching. My blood went cold. I felt a tremor start in my hands and spread through my entire body. I almost dropped the phone. I pressed play, my thumb shaking uncontrollably. The video was silent for a few seconds, just the sound of Caleb's ragged, shallow breathing. Then he spoke, and the sound of his voice will haunt me until the day I die. It was barely a whisper, a strained, terrified hiss that was nothing like the man I knew. It was the voice of prey. "Don't move, Amelia," he breathed, his wide, terrified eyes locked on that spot in the trees. "Whatever you do, don't turn around." Then the camera lurched violently. The world became a chaotic, nauseating blur of green and brown and sky. There was a sickening, wet thud, the sound of the phone hitting the forest floor, and a single choked-off sound from Caleb, something between a gasp and a scream. Then blackness. The video ended. I sat there frozen in the humming silence of my kitchen. The phone was clutched in my hand, feeling both freezing cold and burning hot. The chill wasn't just in my blood anymore. It was in the room, it was in the air I was breathing. I played it again, and a dozen times more. Each time I prayed for the shape in the trees to be a shadow. Each time it resolved itself into that same silent, waiting figure. The thing Caleb saw right before he died. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not get air into my lungs. I stumbled out of my chair and onto the back porch, gasping in the cold night air, my hands braced on my knees. My mind was a screaming chaos. That thing, what was that thing? And the way Caleb said my name, it wasn't a warning for me, the Amelia watching the video 3 years later. It was a warning for the Amelia who was standing right there, just out of frame on that day. The weight of it was too much. I couldn't hold it in. It felt like a poison flooding my system. I did the only thing a person in my state of mind could do. I went online. I found a forum, a place called Unresolved Mysteries, a corner of the internet where people shared their ghost stories and unsolved cases. Anonymity felt like a shield. Under the username Lost Hiker Wife, I wrote it all out. The box in the attic, the old phone, Caleb's death. I described the video in excruciating detail, the way his face changed, the words he whispered. I took a screenshot of the video, circling the dark figure in a shaky red line, and uploaded it. The image was grainy, terrible quality, but the shape was still there, unmistakable. I ended the post with a simple, desperate plea. Has anyone ever seen anything like this? What did my husband see? Hitting post felt like lancing a wound. For a minute there was relief. Then a new wave of horror washed over me as I forced myself to remember that day. The real day we had been fighting. God, we were always fighting then. I accused him of being paranoid, of ruining another trip with his anxieties. He'd been trying to tell me something about feeling watched, about not wanting to be there. I shut him down. I told him he was being dramatic. I remember standing there, my back to the woods, yelling at him. He was holding the phone, trying to film that stupid, cheerful message, and I couldn't take it. "I'm done, Caleb," I'd said, my voice dripping with contempt. "I'm going for a walk, alone." I left. I actually turned my back on him and walked away, deeper into the woods, but on a different path. I left him standing there alone with that thing. The guilt was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. The official story was that he went hiking later and slipped. But the video ended so abruptly. What happened in the moments after the camera fell? Did he run? Did it get him? My memory of that afternoon is a blur of anger and self-pity. But now, thinking back, I remember the woods felt quiet, too quiet. The birds had stopped singing. I thought it was my mood, my anger coloring the world around me. But what if it wasn't? What if I felt it too deep down and chose to run not from him but from that same silent dread? The post on the forum exploded. By the next morning there were hundreds of replies. My inbox was flooded, but the comments didn't help. They just ripped my fragile sanity into confetti. People were sending me links to articles about Bigfoot, about ancient forest spirits, about a local legend called the Tall Man of Blackwood. Others were more cynical, suggesting it was a prank, a hiker in a morph suit, or just a weirdly shaped tree stump. The noise was overwhelming. I needed something real, something tangible. I spent the entire weekend tearing apart the attic, going through Caleb's box with a frantic energy I didn't know I possessed. And at the very bottom, beneath a stack of old maps, I found it, his hiking journal, a small leather-bound book I'd given him for our 5th anniversary. My hands trembled as I opened it. The last few entries were from that trip. His handwriting, usually so neat and precise, was a jagged, barely legible scrawl. October 14th. Arrived, Amelia is angry, don't blame her, but she doesn't understand. It's been following me since we passed the ranger station. I see it at the edge of the road, long, just watching. October 15th, it's here. I saw it this morning when I went to get water. It doesn't hide, it just stands there. It wants me to see it. It's not an animal, it's a tall, pale walker. Found a strange symbol near the creek, sticks and stones arranged in a spiral. Took a picture. I frantically swiped through the phone's gallery again, and there it was, a photo I'd overlooked. A crude spiral made of river stones with a broken branch laid across the center. It looked deliberate, chillingly so. This was it. This was proof. I wasn't crazy. Caleb wasn't crazy. My next call was to the county sheriff's office. I got transferred to a Detective Rourke, the man who had handled the case. He sounded bored, tired. I explained everything, the video, the journal. I could hear him sigh over the phone. Ma'am, he said, his voice flat and patronizing. Amelia, is it? Look, we went over all this 3 years ago. Your husband was under a great deal of stress. But the journal, the video… Amelia, he cut me off. Did you know your husband was seeking psychiatric help before his death? We have his medical records. His therapist's notes mention recurring paranoid delusions, feelings of being watched. He was prescribed medication he wasn't taking. The coroner's report was conclusive. He fell. It was a tragic accident. The journal, it's just a reflection of his troubled state of mind. I'm sorry for your loss, but the case is closed. I hung up the phone. The two realities were at war in my head, a journal entry describing a tall, pale walker and a doctor's note about paranoid delusions, a video of a terrifying figure and a police report about a simple fall. Which one was real? Was I uncovering a hidden truth, or was I just inheriting my dead husband's madness? I felt like I was being torn in two. I went back to the forum, my fingers flying across the keyboard in a desperate, rambling update. I found his journal. He called it a tall, pale walker. He saw it for days. He also found strange symbols, but the police say he was diagnosed with paranoia. They think he made it all up. They won't even look at the video. I don't know what to believe anymore. That's when the real battle began in the comments. The thread split into two warring factions. Team Skeptic was relentless. They posted articles about folie à deux, shared psychotic disorder. He was ill, and your guilt is making you susceptible to his delusions, one user wrote. It's a classic case of gaslighting yourself with grief. You need to talk to a professional, not us. They analyzed the screenshot, claiming the figure was a textbook example of pareidolia, the brain seeing patterns where none exist. But Team Believer was just as passionate. They latched onto the tall, pale walker description. People from all over the country started sharing stories of similar sightings in national parks. They talked about strange disappearances, about places where people just vanished off the trail. The police always cover it up, another user insisted. They call it an accident or a bear attack because they don't want to cause a panic and lose tourist revenue. Don't listen to them. Caleb saw something real. The arguments raged, but they weren't just on the screen anymore. They were inside my head. Every creak of my apartment building at night was the sound of a footstep outside my door. Every shadow in the corner of my eye was a tall, slender figure about to resolve itself into focus. I started sleeping with the lights on. I'd be in the shower and would suddenly be convinced that something was standing on the other side of the curtain, silent and still. The paranoia was a vine, wrapping itself around my life, choking everything. I'd be walking down the street in broad daylight and feel a prickling on the back of my neck, the undeniable sensation of being watched. I'd whip my head around, my heart pounding, only to see a street full of strangers staring at me like I was insane. Maybe I was, maybe Rourke was right. Maybe this was just what grief and guilt did to a person, or maybe the thing from the woods wasn't content to stay there. Maybe somehow it knew I had the video. And maybe it had followed me home. It's been 6 months since I opened that box, 6 months since my life split into a before and an after. I couldn't stay in that apartment. The memories, the shadows, they were too loud. I broke my lease, packed 2 suitcases, and moved to a city 3 states away where I didn't know a soul. I got a new job, a boring data entry position in a faceless office building. I was trying to outrun a ghost. I don't go online anymore. I deleted my account on the forum. The arguments of strangers felt like stones being thrown at my sanity. I put Caleb's old phone in a safety deposit box like it was a radioactive artifact. I needed to exist as proof, but I can never look at it again. My new apartment is on the 7th floor. I thought the height would make me feel safe. I keep the blinds closed always. Even during the day, my world has shrunk to these few hundred square feet. But you can't outrun what's in your own head or what might be outside your window. I'm sitting here now on my new couch in my new safe life. The city hums outside, but in the quiet moments I still hear it, the snap of a twig, the whisper of Caleb's voice. Don't turn around, sometimes I get this feeling. It's the same cold prickle on my neck that I felt that day in the woods, only I was too angry to notice. A feeling of being observed. Scrutinized, I tell myself it's trauma, PTSD. A diagnosis that would neatly explain everything away, just like the police did with Caleb. But just a minute ago, I saw something. A flicker of movement in the reflection on my dark TV screen, in the window behind me. It was just for a second, a distortion. Something long and pale against the brick of the building opposite. I'm not going to look. I'm just going to sit here, staring at my own reflection, my heart hammering a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs. I will never know what was really in the woods with Caleb that day. And I will never, ever know for sure if the shadow I just saw was real, or if it's just the one he left behind, burned forever into the back of my mind. The watching, the waiting, it never ends.